All right. All right, then we're going to get started here. So welcome to everyone for our Tuesday, March 8th Admin and Public Works Committee meeting. This is a special meeting because it is our first meeting since the start of pandemic for this committee to do hybrid in person and for Zoom for anyone who wishes to participate by Zoom. So it's good to see everyone. We see each other at council meetings and other functions, so good to get this one going again. So we're going to get started here. First item on the agenda will be our roll call. So Carla?
Okay. Chair Garitano.
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino. Councilmember Brost.
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell. Here. Let's see you. Councilmember Edens. Here. Councilmember Hopper. Councilmember Nyhan. Here. Councilmember Rambo.
Here.
All right, thank you for that, for the roll call here. So next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes for February 8th. Is there anyone that would like to make a motion for approval of the minutes? If you wish to approve, raise your hand. Made by Councilmember Brost, or seconded by Councilmember Edens. Any questions on the minutes? All right, seeing none. All those in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed or abstain? All right, the minutes are approved. Next item is public participation, and great to welcome some residents here tonight. I know that we have an item or two, actually two items on the agenda that I'm aware of that are of interest. So thank you for attending tonight. If you do wish to speak, this would be the time to do it. You'll be allotted up to 5 minutes to make public comment, and this would be the only time on the agenda to do it. So if you do wish to speak, please come forward. Carla, you have a card?
I do. I have a card for Kathy Rapp.
Okay. All right, this would be the time, Ms. Rapp.
I do have a loud voice. I know this is on the agenda. This is regarding the public dedication of private roads, but we need to let you know regarding our community. We are requesting the city of Wildwood to consider taking over Victoria Crossing condominium roads. We'd like to emphasize, these are condos. They are not apartments, and these are our homes. They were built in 1991. We have 22 buildings, which house 264 families, most of whom are single retired residents. There are, we work with a $500,000 budget each year that keeps going up as costs continue to go up. These figures will only keep rising as the buildings are now going on 31 years old. We are having to spend upwards of tens of thousands of dollars every year to maintain our community and keep it up to Wildwood standards. Most of our residents are on fixed income, so we've tried to keep our HOA fees affordable, but we are finding it harder and harder to keep up with the rising cost of goods, services, especially with street and snow removal cost. Therefore, we're asking the city of Wildwood to consider taking over the care of four streets: Victoria Crossing, Jubilee Hill, Viceroy, and Imperial Crown Way. This will allow us to use our funds to replace the siding on our buildings, replace inadequate gutters that cannot accommodate the heavy rains, replace our roofs, replace our buckling and crumbling sidewalks, repair and replace asphalt parking areas, tie walls, decks, many other projects that need to keep our community looking as the other Wildwood communities look. We need and must keep affordable living for seniors choosing to remain at home. And therefore, we're asking our plea to please help us out. And to introduce, Connie Daly is the president of the board, and I am the vice president of the condo association. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other cards? All right, we don't have any other cards, so last call. If there are any other comments here, this would be the time. And therefore, seeing none, we'll close public participation and we'll continue with our agenda item here. Do want to recognize Miss Emma Clark. She's in the back. She's a student at Eureka, and she has been serving as like an intern with our city here, learning about government. So great to have you come to a committee meeting tonight. Thanks for joining us. All right, on to the agenda item number 4 under administration. We do have several for information items. So the first item is the Deer Management Subcommittee. Oh, did we not say? I thought we said aye. Yeah.
Oh, we did. On roll call.
Did we approve the minutes? Yes, we did.
Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. That's all right. So next is the Deer Management Subcommittee update. So this would be just an opportunity to share where we are with that. I know Mr. or Councilmember Rambo, Doctor, is working on a summary report. And I don't know if you wanted to share anything. I know it's still in progress here.
Yeah, it's still in progress. I really hope to have the document next month, but I kind of forgot when I was committing about the election and a few other tax time, et cetera, et cetera. And we also had Brad Wendling retire, who was our police liaison. And I've spoken to Captain Mundell about a replacement for him, but there's critical data that needs to come from the police department. And that's really, part of the hang up, but it will be comfortably done. I'm confident through council and, approved, et cetera, before next deer hunting season starts, which is, the middle of August next year. So that's been my target all along.
Okay. Councilmember Rambo, maybe I was thinking of an idea here, just interested in your thoughts, and as well as anyone here on the council. This was originally, there was one meeting I wasn't available for, that was an item that was under the, let's say, ownership of the Board of Public Safety, if I recall, right? They were the group that was handling it, and they had a deer subcommittee, if I recall correctly.
Yes, they had a deer management subcommittee that produced a report, and it wasn't it didn't have any actions that would have made a dent in the problem. And so we took it on, and we have a small deer management subcommittee of Councilmember Bertolino, the council member next to you that's constantly traveling, and the Sergeant Wendling and myself are trying to do a more comprehensive job. And the idea is to lay out, these are the actions, including no action whatsoever, and then a handful of other actions. Here is what the costs are likely to be, and here's the opportunity. Here's what the effects will be from each alternative. And the trick is narrowing it down from the 100-page academic report that I'm, normally inclined to do, to a handful of pages that everybody can digest and talk about. That's really the hang up. But the change from the Deer Management Subcommittee of the Public Safety Commission was I don't know, 9 months ago or so, something like that.
It was a while back. And so the reason I bring it up here and interested in your thoughts, and even the city administrator, who I think you have familiarity with that committee, the Board of Public Safety, is that we as council members, we will see this, what you produce at the council level as well. So I think we are all going to have our opportunity to review it. But my thoughts were that maybe that group would be the one to benefit the most out of what you produced, since they were the ones originally tasked with it. So that's what I was thinking of is, do we want to continue to keep the item as an item under our committee, still with you working on it, or do we send it to that group there, letting them know that you are acting on our behalf to put that together, and then we will see it when it comes back to council. City Administrator Cross, do you think that group would be interested in having that item back? Because I'm just concerned that they're going to say they haven't seen this, and there are some folks that are not council members on there that originally were part of that discussion.
Mr. Chair, as you noted, this project, if you will, did start with Board of Public Safety. I am not, and I was involved because I sit on that committee or as the staff liaison anyway. But I don't know how it ended or how it came to the admin PW. Maybe someone else's memory is better than mine in terms of how it came to this committee. But I think that the Board of Public Safety would welcome the work that Councilmember Rambo has done. But since they spend an awful lot of time and Dr. Rambo is correct, we lost a great asset on that particular front in the retirement of Sergeant Wendling, because I've spoken to the captain multiple times and he does not have that knowledge. But the committee itself, particularly with the new marshal now, I think would welcome that work and so forth. But it seems to me, unless I'm forgetting something, and very well could be, that it seems to me that the recommendation to council probably should come from Board of Public Safety. As I say, there's a disconnect in my mind, and maybe someone can help me how it ended up here at admin PW. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, Councilmember Rambo, I didn't have the opportunity, I didn't think of this like a week ago. So
Yeah,
the thought came to me this afternoon.
News to me here.
Yeah,
I wasn't prepared for this discussion. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. So I just want to put it out there because we didn't have a chance to connect on it, but being that there is the police component of it, and there's a key part of that would be their input on that. I'm just concerned that we might be bypassing the police, enforcement of whatever comes out of the, summary that you're putting together. And I'm trying to think of a way of how we can make sure we include that as there, but try to also do it efficiently, because I don't want to keep ping-ponging this back and forth. So that's why I brought it up here. I know it's, something that, just kind of got, presented to you. Otherwise, we would have had a chance to talk. So think about it. Councilmember Dodwell, I think you've got a thought. It looks like you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Garritano. The reason that we moved it out of public safety was because they had tossed it around for quite a while themselves and had not come to a final decision on things. Then they established the subcommittee, and the subcommittee was supposed to come back to our group and provide us a good overview, because deer management was supposed to be what this subcommittee was working on. So I'd still like to have whatever finishing report, if it could go to both groups at the same time, I would suggest that we do that. And then we get the recommendation from that team, because you had just said in your review here that some of what public safety had put together, you weren't real keen on, is the impression I got, but that may have been incorrect. So I just want to make sure that we move this along, because it's been in public safety for a couple of years.
Yeah, so can I?
Of course.
Again, this is really off the cuff and I don't like to work that way, but it took 2.5 years to get the report that recommended expanded opportunities for bow hunting. that's all well and good, but it won't solve the problem. It adds recreational opportunities for a handful of folks that like that sort of hunting, but it might get rid of 2% or 5% of the problem, and it will be of concern for folks who don't want hunting in their backyards, and they're worried about their children, and they like to enjoy the fall outside and so on and so forth. So it's a tricky problem. And I wrote up a document to that effect and distributed it to folks. Just here's some food for thought. And somehow it wound up that I'm leading this subcommittee and developing a new plan. And I'm happy to do that because I have a broad knowledge of the subject from the time I was a child. But it's really tricky. It's going to be expensive. Any solution that will help out is going to be, it's going to be pricey. And so the more input we get ahead of time, the less strife and disruption we have when it gets to the council. And so I am happy to work with anybody about this. Before it gets, before it fully hits the public. And so if you want to reconstitute that committee, but I think there were several retirements or departures from the Deer Management Subcommittee of the Public Safety Committee. And so it's kind of starting over. And I just didn't want to get into the hunter versus non-hunter, rifle versus bow. The problem is much broader than that. We need to solve the public safety issue. So I would welcome that. I just don't know how to gain traction.
I think the key thing will be that because the police department doesn't have a seat at the council level, to get that input from where they currently have a seat, which is at the Board of Public Safety, because I can't speak on their behalf.
Sure.
And we need to get the law enforcement side of it incorporated. So that's why it's a last minute thought when I brought it up. Otherwise, again, we would have had a good chance to have a conversation over it.
Sergeant Wendling was quite helpful, but he's gone now, and I have the raw data. But having the police department representation is a critical missing piece of this current puzzle.
So it may be that when you do produce that report, still have a way to get it before them to get their input on that. See what questions they may have.
So what's my path? My idea was that, my thought was that, again, it was 2.5 years in the initial phase. It's been a few months on this second phase. I would like to get it off my plate because it's staring at me, and I've been procrastinating a little bit. As I mentioned, there were other things came up, but I was just going to get it to you and to Steve and Rick and get it on the agenda. So, for us to discuss, but if there's another avenue, I'm happy to.
No, I think I would say that the Board of Public Safety still should be the one to see it, but I'll ask the committee here. Do you want to see it, or do you want to wait till it comes back to council to see it then? So if there's, maybe just a quick show of hands, and then I'll let you express your comments. Do you want to see it back in this committee, or defer it to go to when it gets to council to see it?
I would like to see it go back to the Board of Public Safety once Rob is finished with it. I feel like they worked really long and hard on it, and maybe they didn't come up with the greatest solutions, I don't think from lack of effort, but I feel out of respect to for all the time they put in on it, that it should at least come back to them so they can see it and give their 2 cents.
But do you want it back at this committee, or do you want to wait till it gets to council?
I would think it's fine to go to council if it goes to safety committee and then comes out of there. I mean, I guess I'm fine either way, I guess, but.
Okay, I think that's, so one for council. What are your thoughts? You're interested in seeing it here, back here, or when it goes to council?
Well, I guess, to have the, public safety see it, I think is important for folks council, but I don't know why we wouldn't want to review and, at this level, get the input, because I think if it goes directly back to council, again, it's not going to land well. There's just too much data there to absorb.
Okay.
I think there needs to be I don't know, a joint recommendation between the groups of
The way I would suggest doing it, I'm more comfortable with, as Larry suggested. I think it makes sense to get a document, a sort of a straw man document, if you will, bring it back here, and fine tune it and refine it, and then say, okay, this is probably a decent effort. Let's send it to the Board of Public Safety, see what they think of it. And then, we can work together on it in a more cooperative way, because right now, if we kick it back, it's going to be, well, wait a minute. The only thing that we came up with was, let's expand bow hunting. And it's much more complex and a much larger problem than that. And I don't want to be fighting with another committee. That's senseless. I want to get a consensus and take it to council.
Okay, I hear you, Councilmember Evans.
Yeah, I was going to say the reason why we would want to have it back here is because this is going to have probably a rather large fiscal note and a plan and approach over time, right? And so when it was in the other body's purview before, you had a group of hunters that just went, well, we really, these are expensive solutions. Let's not spend any of the budget.
Yes.
But it's our job to look at the budget, right? We put that on our 5-year plan. We really know what we can and cannot spend. So I'm afraid if it just goes back to Board of Public Safety, we just reinvented the entire wheel we tried to get off of. We're on the hamster wheel, and we're going to have a group of citizens, well-meaning, trying to save us money and come up with a non-workable solution. And so out of respect to them, absolutely. Let's send, Rob as an emissary to the committee just to speak on behalf of it, but let's be conscious of their power of review when it comes to the spending. And so that's why I think it's important to have it at this level before we get to council with 16 people and a big ticket item, because I think it'll just be chaos without a recommendation from this body.
Well, that's fair enough. And I think the sentiment, the consensus I get is we'll have it here, but definitely want to make sure it goes to Board of Public Safety to get there, so it becomes a joint recommendation.
Sure, that's absolutely the right approach.
All right, fair enough. All right, then I don't see any other discussion on this
Mr.
matter
Chair.
here. Yeah.
Excuse me, if you don't mind, I made a note. And what I'll do is follow up with the captain and see who he might recommend to replace Sergeant Wendling, who he might have within the ranks that has similar knowledge that could help fill in and provide that side of the house expertise. So I'll check with the captain and let you all know.
Okay. All right. And Councilmember Rambo, thank you for working on that. Again, no pressure. So just, I understand you got your plate full.
Pressure on myself.
No, it's fair.
And I have, it's kind of hard to jump back in.
No worries. All right. Next item on the agenda is the update on the Old State Road issues there. Is that City Administrator?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, quite a few updates, I guess. I'm going to go back to the roundabout. So we've talked about the roundabout. You all are very much aware of that. It was not going to go to East-West Gateway for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that it would not have passed muster and so forth. But fortunately, Director Brown and Stephanie Streeter, I think is her last name, who is the acting director of Public Works with the county, they did have a sit-down meeting with the East-West Gateway to talk about the scoring and so forth. So I think they've got a pretty good idea of what would be expected next year. But also there was a big component where the county was not going to participate this year at all. And that was just a flat no. So it would have been DOA had we tried to go forward with just the city of Wildwood and the city of Ellisville. However, so that aside, and we'll address that in a little less than a year from now. But I did notice that the county was out today, in fact, at the intersection of Old State Road and Ridge Road, and they appeared to be getting ready to stripe that intersection. You all may recall that the county did say as an interim measure that they would change how cars coming westbound or coming up to Old State Road on Ridge Road, and to change that so that might they would not be at an oblique angle, but more at a 90-degree angle, and that they were going to do that when the weather warmed up. So I saw them out today, mentioned it to Director Brown. He reached out to Stephanie to get confirmation that they are starting that process. So that's that intersection. Now let's travel a little bit further south. Mr. Vanek will like to hear this, that we are now moving forward with the rapid flashing lights at the crosswalk. So we executed a memorandum of understanding with the county that was signed by the mayor that you all passed at the council meeting. The county signed off on that. So, and we have notified the Meyer Electric, who is our electric contractor that will be actually doing the installation. And they said they would get it done within 30 days. So we simply, and they're granting all the easements at no cost to the city. So that project is really should be starting any day. I would think we have to pick up the material from the warehouse or the facility at St. Louis County, but that is ready to go. So everything, all signatures, everything will be done. Now, if we move down to Mr. Vanek's subdivision, Fairhaven, you all may recall that in a previous update that I provided actually to the council as well as you all, that what the county had suggested, it was asked if the county would somehow, are we on microphone?
Yeah, this microphone just died too.
Hello, hello, hello.
Testing, 1, 2. Hello, hello.
Can you hear? No. Can you hear that?
It goes green, but you can't hear it.
There you go.
I hear
You're
a
on
little
that
bit.
one now.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and continue. I don't know, Travis, let me know if you need me to stop. Anyway, there was a request to see if the Hill Blocks view signs, both southbound and northbound on Old State Road could be flashing. The county was not able to do that for various reasons. But what they did offer was that they would put in a kind of an island there in the intersection of that road, the main road going into Fairhaven Estates. And so Rick and I had a conversation with the trustees of Fairhaven Estates, and they were interested in the project, had some questions which we have researched. There's one sticking point, however, that Rick and I just talked about here recently, and that has to do with large trucks turning into the subdivision, like moving trucks, full-size moving trucks. So we had a traffic study done, and they expressed concern about that. So we need to go back to the trustees and talk to them about maybe lowering that island a little bit where it actually would be traversable over that island there in the center, as opposed, the trustees were talking about turning it into a planter 3 or 4 foot high, but that won't fly because it'll get splattered all over the road in quick order. But anyway, so we are working on that to see again how, and if that doesn't work, we'll look at other things, because ultimately what we're trying to do is we are trying to get cars to go a little bit further south as they're coming down Old State Road to crest the hill before making a left turn into Fairhaven Estates. And that's the source. There has been one accident in 7 years. And it was that very, very issue where a southbound vehicle was turning into Fairhaven and then got hit by a northbound vehicle because that person was trying to cut, the corner and didn't see the oncoming traffic. The intent of the striping, the additional striping on Old State Road, and putting in this island would cause cars southbound to go a little bit further to where they would actually see the oncoming traffic and then make a left into Fairhaven. So we're still working on that. So that's the updates for the immediacy. I mean, I'm not going to get into the multi-use path and so forth. We've already talked that at council, and that's a few years down the road. But these are the things that are happening immediately right now. So I know it's for information, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has anything.
Yeah, I would just ask one question is, what do you see as our next steps, like going back to east-west, whenever that application timeframe is? Like, what's it look like? Do you think Ellisville will still be interested? Will the county maybe be interested? And when is that a good time to make sure we start talking about that?
The short answer to your first two questions, yes, LSO will be interested, and yes, the county. In our recent meetings, in meeting actually with Stephanie from the county, as well as Mark Harder from St. Louis County Council. They are definitely interested next year. The budget will be easier to put in this. So, I mean, if we're talking, a $2.2 million project, I think would be the price tag nowadays for that. If we split it in thirds, I think it is palatable. I'm not going to speak for the council, but I think it would be palatable here, and it would be palatable to Ellisville. In talking to my counterpart at Ellisville. So we need all three parties to buy in, and right now they're saying. So when would we start that process again? Rick I'd start those conversations. I think it was somewhere around February the 10th was the deadline, if I recall, to go to East West Gateway. So we would start those conversations certainly in the fall, maybe in the October, and make sure everybody's still buying in. They still have money in the budget, et cetera. And that probably is the new budget for the county. If we start talking in October, that would be my recommendation. Mr. Brown may have other thoughts on that.
I would concur. We probably need to reach out to them, stay in touch, but by fall, it's when we probably need to be circling the wagons again and talking with the county to move it forward. Yep.
Well, that's just the reason I was asking, like, when we want to make sure we build enough time in to go through the process. And I know Mr. Vanek sent an email to council with a report that he had done some research. So greatly appreciative of the information in there, that he shared with the council here. And I think that's good for us to.
Now, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I will add a little bit to my answer, because you said, what other things do we need to do? We've gone to East West Gateway now twice, and in both cases have not been able to provide enough sufficient data that would allow for their funding. Even at a I guess, I mean, we went in this last time at an 80-20, and the time before that was 50-50, I think. And they both have failed because the statistics do not support putting a roundabout there. There's no accident data. There's been one accident in 5 years there, and it was a single car accident. It was somebody who fell asleep at the wheel and just simply ran off the road. So from a vehicular point of view, that intersection does not rate high with East West Gateway. Unless something changes drastically over the next 7-8 months or so, I'm not going to speak for East West Gateway. We'll do everything we can, but right now we don't have the data to support them funding that versus, and think of all the intersections and all the roads the county is responsible for. And they have told us point blank, there's way more areas that actually do have injuries and deaths in other intersections, and that's where the money goes. And they so far have not been able to see their way clear to provide money for this project. We'll do everything we can, but I don't want to create any false hope.
Yeah, I understand our record in the past. Just again, asking based on what we're hearing from the people there, and primarily Ward 7 there, Councilmember Hopper and Councilmember Flasher probably have more input on that. Their constituents are directly there, so I'll defer to them to share as well what they hear. But that's the only reason I wanted to ask, to see, what options or things can we do in the future. Councilmember Edens?
Yep, I know that I brought it up at a previous meeting and it wasn't completely shot down. But there was some thought about, whether this made sense with a roundabout, doing both projects. But can we not try an application, even if it's through a different grant source, for a pedestrian tunnel rather than a public safety improvement, as a pedestrian biking friendly improvement, since we've been able to do that in other areas, so that we don't have to have traffic data and accident data. So just getting at the problem from a totally different, means. And I say that because, I went and redrove that road again recently. And I think the key to the success for the stopping crosswalk is the ability to slow traffic down coming up to that point. And if there isn't something in the future that slows traffic down, I could see, somebody slamming on the brakes and getting rear-ended to stop for that cross light and us having a secondary problem.
Well, a pedestrian overpass or a tunnel will not have an effect on vehicular traffic, and that's what the roundabout is meant to do,
Right.
is to take care of that issue. With regards to an overpass or a tunnel, that would strictly be in Wildwood and it would be a much more significant cost. So I will point that out. You may have noticed that the police had put out, the Wildwood Police as well as the Ellisville on each side of within their own city limits, speed signs that were mounted. They gathered the data. Mr. Brown and I talked to Captain Mundell and looked at that data, and the data showed that there was no speeding that was going on within the parameters. And as you all know, Rick is is a traffic engineer, so he can speak way more intelligently about this than I. But there was no data to support speeding or anything like that that would give rise to changing the speed limit or making any changes. Those speed signs or the devices then were taken down for a period of 2 weeks or so, and then they've been back up now within the last few days. So they are gathering information a second time to see if there is a significant change in what they saw the first time. So we can always look into, but ultimately it'll be up to the council. I mean, if we were going to go that route, we would need to, Rick would go and get quotes and that sort of thing. But at this point, I'm going to let the expert weigh in and see if he wants to add anything. Rick?
Thank you, Steve. I did want to mention one thing, because I know that the discussion on the tunnel did come up at City Council. And when the concept plan was developed some years ago for Old State, they did look at this. And there is a tunnel that was proposed as part of that concept plan, but the tunnel goes and is proposed to be just north of Lakeshore Meadows. And the idea there was to connect the Fairhaven subdivision to the trail on the opposite side of Old State Road, and then potentially continue the trail to the north on that same side. But that's where it was proposed. It wasn't proposed up at the roundabout. That was to be an at-grade crossing. But nonetheless, a tunnel in the long run would definitely be, in my opinion, part of the plan. And I think the best option to get that funded would be the enhancement program, which is what we have used previously for trail projects. I probably should do some checking, quite frankly. I don't know when the next round of funding is coming out, but usually it's on an annual basis or thereabouts. So that is something, in my opinion, that could be considered. Although I would caution you that would be a very expensive project, because to do it, you have to change the grade of Old State Road. So basically, to put the tunnel in, you're rebuilding Old State Road. That's the problem with it. It's going to be an expensive project.
And we're rebuilding Old State Road.
You're there now.
There you go.
You got it. You got it.
Thank you. If we're rebuilding Old State Road, that's a county decision. That's not a city Wildwood decision. It's their road. And I will tell you that when we met with them before, Stephanie did nothing but say, we're broke. We have no money. There's nothing we can do about anything for years down the road. So we would certainly work with them, but that's what they told us anyway now. So.
Well, it is a firm information item, so that's a lot of good updates here. No action that we could take on that at this point, but keep it on our list of items to revisit as we talked about later this year, and see how we could pursue something if it's feasible. All right, next on the agenda is the update on the electric vehicle charging station. City Administrator.
Thank you, Chair. There's a memorandum authored by Mr. Brown, which summarizes where we are today. And actually, there's an additional update that did just occur today. But we've been meeting with two different entities and gathering pricing. We hope to get some pricing later this week from one and next week from another. In terms of the types of charging stations, there are two different kinds. There's rapid charging. There's charging that'll charge 10% every hour or something like that, or there's statistics, but there's some that'll charge a vehicle pretty much full within 50 minutes, those kinds of things, but those are considerably more expensive. So we're gathering that information. We've had their engineers out. We've looked at power supplies and all that sort of thing. I received an email today from a third entity that is interested in providing a quote that Rick and I talked about, and we're going to, it doesn't hurt to have that conversation as well. So we will have that conversation probably within the next week for this third entity. So we're still, we're meeting with them, we're gathering information, and certainly by the next meeting, I had hoped we'd have some pricing, but the weather prevented them from getting out. We had to cancel a couple of meetings because of the weather. But I'd hope to have something at this meeting, but we definitely will at the April meeting and have pricing.
Councilmember Dodwell.
I just wanted to mention that it'd be great if we could get all the alternatives pulled together so that we can have it for part of our budget talks later this year as well. So I appreciate all the work you and Rick have been doing to gather that info.
Thank you, Ms. Dodwell. And yes, that would certainly be what we'd want to do is to give you all details about where potentially it could be located in City Hall. I'm going to be embarking on conversations with Mr. Cohn to see, because there are going to be one, possibly two charging stations at the Prime Place. So I know that he's planning on one or two. I want to talk to him to see if he might want to put some at the theater. If we're going to go down the road, remember this all started with Mr. Rambo, in terms of, hey, why don't we try to do something? And I think it's a great idea. So if we have one, that's going to bring more people to us. But certainly when we come back to this group, would be what we're talking about, how many we're talking about, what the cost of the city is, what any revenue generated would come to the city, et cetera. So, you all can make an informed decision about whether this makes sense or not. So that would be the plan.
Okay, we'll look for that in an upcoming agenda. Next item regarding accessibility issues. I spoke with Councilmember Clark, and she and I discussed that we will be bringing this to council. So at this point right now, we will not have any updates, and we'll hope to try to get that for next month. There are no further action items. And then under Public Works, we have a couple of items. One is an update under the for information regarding the 2022 concrete street replacement project.
Thank you, Chair Garitano. I'll just address this really quickly. As you may recall, at the last meeting last month, you all approved a recommendation to move forward with a contract with Kelp Contracting to do the 2022 concrete street replacement project. That was an extension of their prior contract for 2021. And that did show up, I believe, on the council's agenda last meeting for first reading. Tom Kelp advised me shortly after your last meeting that he was unable to move forward with that agreement with us under the terms that we expected he would be agreeable with. Unfortunately, he felt the costs were too high now, and he would be losing money if he accepted it based on if you recall, there was a 4.4% increase included. That was the idea, to include the 4.4% increase. So he was just simply not willing to do it. He felt he would lose too much money. So we're at the situation where we can't move forward with that agreement as proposed. However, after talking with Steve about it, we went back to Tom and asked if he would provide us a proposal based on something that is acceptable to him. And the idea would be that he would provide that to us in advance of your next meeting on Monday night. I don't have it in hand just yet. I probably should check with them tomorrow to be sure we can receive it. But the thought would be review it if it is something that we can accept, make that recommendation Monday night, and then I guess a bill would have to be, or a motion would have to be made to amend the bill and take a new bill in its place.
Sure, City Administrator Cross.
Thank you, Chair Gaetano. The reason I asked Rick to go back to Tom, Mr. Kelp, is that Rick speaks very, very highly of the firm and the work that they've done in the city. And I hate to lose that and start with somebody new that we may not have experience with. So, Mr. Kelp said that the 4.4% increase would not cover his increase in costs. But the point is that anybody that we get are going to be experiencing the same kind of costs. So, so I asked Rick to go back and say, well, what will it take? What do you need? And I wanted Rick, to do that as like a partnership and say, we love working with you. You've done great. Let's try to find a win-win situation. How much do you really need to cover your costs and get a reasonable profit? And, and instead of him throwing out a 25%, just whatever, and see if he'll work with the city. And ultimately it's going to be up to the council to decide. But the point is that we're going to end up probably going to somebody else and probably experiencing the same thing. So I hate to lose a really, really good contractor that we were very happy with. So that's why I asked him to go back.
Thank you for that. And the memorandum also highlighted that there are a low number of bidders for some of the other cities. So I think that's another good point there. So this just for information item, no action on this. Next, under for action, we have 3 items. The first one is the proposed modifications to the policy on public dedication of private streets.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take this one. And this item was on your agenda for the consideration at the last meeting, but we didn't quite get around to it. So we moved it to this meeting. And every year we seem to receive a request or two for the department to take over public streets or take over private streets for public dedication. And you may or may not be aware, we actually have a policy in place. We've had a policy in place to cover this since about 2002. I don't believe it's been reviewed or necessarily amended since 2002, but we do have a policy in place that we use as the basis of our consideration of those requests. So as of this time, you heard from the representative with Carriage Crossing, but we also have a request from Radcliffe Place subdivision down on at 109 and Old State Road, as well as Old State Place subdivision on Old State Road. All those have recently inquired about the possibility of the city taking over their streets, their private streets. And I did want to make the point that we also have another consideration out there. The recent master plan update that looked at the town center plan, that committee recommended that, and you may or may not be fully aware of this, but there are alleyways in the town center that are private. And that review, when it was done more recently, they made a recommendation, the committee did, that alleys become public within the town center. So if you're aware, Windsor Crest subdivision has an alleyway that's primarily private. As you go through Main Street Crossing, as you go through Brightleaf, there are some alleyways. Those are intended to be private as the way that we developed the plans in conformance with our town center code. But the committee was recommending that be changed. So that's another consideration that's out there. In accordance to the policy, I wanted to mention a few things. It does state that only streets that are established prior to the adoption of the policy in 2002 are eligible for acceptance. So that right off the bat tends to rule out a number of neighborhoods, quite frankly. The other stipulations of the policy are that they must require a petition that is supposed to have 100% of the residents in agreement that the streets be transferred. And of course, they have to meet our street requirements. So if a subdivision comes to us, we evaluate their streets to determine if they meet our current standards. Quite frankly, a lot of the older streets don't. They're narrower. They don't have full depth asphalt that we currently would require. They don't have other items that are required by our standards. So frequently, that's a major issue right there. If they are considering going forward, the requirement is that they meet our standards. So we'd have to give them a checklist of things that need to be done to improve their streets as a condition of the acceptance by the city. I would note that the policy does not explicitly state that our long-term maintenance costs and budget impacts of taking over these streets should be considered. And I think that's the main reason we wanted to bring it to you tonight. With these numerous new requests and the situation we're facing with our own expenses, it just seems like that should be a more explicit requirement of the policy, to be quite frank. And I provided you some information in my memorandum. I don't know if you got a chance to review it or not, but that table 1, I tried to provide a tabulation of our recent costs for concrete street replacement to give you an idea of how those expenses are going up relative to the Road and Bridge Fund, which is the main fund that we use to fund our capital maintenance projects. So unfortunately, those two funds, the Road and Bridge Fund is about flat. I mean, there's a little bit of growth there over time, but by and large, it's been flat, and it has been subject to recessions. The Great Recession was a big impact to it. Obviously, the pandemic was a big impact to it, but it's just not growing at a rate that exceeds inflation, frankly. But when you look at our concrete street replacement costs, they've been growing at about 5% per year. So the end result is we're doing less every year, unfortunately, and we need to be doing more, in my opinion. So we're definitely getting stretched. And the concern is if we're not cognizant of these requests and the impact on the bottom line, it's going to impact our ability to maintain our streets in the future. So to kind of boil it down to the request tonight is to consider changes in the policy. And the main change would be adding a stipulation requirement that would mean that these streets, if they are accepted, must be fiscally neutral or potentially not a negative impact to the city financially. That's the thought. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to Steve Cross if he wants to add anything. Otherwise, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown hit the nail on the head. And again, tonight is not to discuss a particular subdivision or anything like that, but we do have a policy that we'd like to amend, because when you have a subdivision, let's take Radcliffe as an example. That's, I don't know, 150 homes, 160 homes. It's a very, very large subdivision. I don't know how many miles of street are in there, but it's a lot. And it's about 3 miles of street. That's a lot. That is a lot to put into the budget for slab replacement, sidewalk replacement, curb replacement, as well as snow removal. So, and we are getting more and more of these requests. We had one from another subdivision off of St. Paul Road about a year ago. Same thing, but when we provided what they needed to do to the streets to bring them up to city standards, they said that we don't have money to do that. We're more than happy to do it, but I mean, the council ultimately, this committee, and then ultimately the council needs to decide, is that something that we want to do that fits within our budget? And my concern as the city administrator is that if we do this and if we don't have the budget dollars, then we don't have the money to maintain our own streets that we are in fact responsible for, much less subdivisions that are private, so forth. So I think Rick's salient points should be considered, which are, you know, about the fiscal neutrality of taking on streets, because our budgets are getting squeezed, and we don't have necessarily new, you know, there's certain things that fund the Road and Bridge Fund or the Capital Fund and so forth, and nothing in today's world is changing those revenue sources. So thank you.
I did see 2 hands up, Councilmember Edens and then Councilmember Gross and Rambo afterwards. So Councilmember Edens.
Okay, yep. So I have a question and then a comment. And so when you say fiscally neutral, you mean the best that we can calculate at the time of adoption, right? Because let's say we have a really bad, snow year. I mean, we've all seen plenty of times where we've had to have an extra funding bill for additional road salt, et cetera, that wasn't originally part of the balanced budget. So define revenue neutral or cost neutral.
Well, you raise a good point in terms of we'd have to think about that sort of thing and how we would do that. And that's a discussion for another day. What we're asking this committee to consider is how we might change that policy. That's why we asked Mr. Young to attend tonight's meeting, simply for this one item on the agenda, because the other items he wasn't. But we do have him kind of on standby to aid in this discussion if need be. But we would want to try to build in some language in some form or fashion that the HOA from that subdivision maintains, that if the costs go up, that comes from the subdivision. I don't know at this point how we would do that. I have no idea, because this is a new concept, at least for the city of Wildwood. But again, the point is how do we mitigate or eliminate the additional cost coming to the city for once we agree to take over city? And that's what we're asking you all to consider.
Mhm. Yeah, okay. So here's my comments is right now we're kind of on cleanup duty for a problem that in some ways I feel as a total council we have exacerbated, right? So not that long ago, we had a discussion about making sure that we would be planning for our financial future. And that included a ballot initiative to raise tax dollars for internet sales purchases, because we don't capture data. We are a sales tax only city. We do not collect property taxes. And many people spoke in favor of it. And then when it came to a final vote, the council overwhelmingly voted to indefinitely postpone. In fact, one council member said, gee, I don't know what we'd spend the money on. And so I have felt like a canary in a coal mine for the last couple of years, saying that every year, and this is exactly echoing what our public works director and city administrator have said, that we are doing more and more with less. We are slated to continue to grow as a city. That's part of our master plan. And the excuse that revenues are flat or staying the same is still a bad comparison point with inflation. That dollar has less power than it did in 2018. So the fact that it's the same doesn't help me. And so the chickens done come home to roost from the votes that happened. And so I tried to hold down on the fort, but the message that we need to be telling our residents now is, since that was voted down, is that things are not going to be able to stay the same. So, and unfortunately, it mostly affects Ward 7 and 8. Now, there are plenty of properties, that will be sold in Ward 2 that may be developed, for new subdivisions down the road. But for the most part, it doesn't affect my ward, but I did try on that. But you're starting to see the consequences of not planning in the future with the ballot initiative to increase revenue.
Councilmember Gross.
Yeah, I guess a couple things. One is on the cost neutral discussion. I'm not sure we can really take this any further, because I don't think we know what is even being asked for. So on that. So I think it'd be good to quantify that. Laura, on your comments, Lauren, it's a tough one. If we spend more money, we're going to have to get more money. So the question is do you spend more money? Now, in our private little subdivision, I think we have 5 miles of road. So could the city please take over all the costs starting tomorrow? Plowing, salt, our salt bills are real high this year. Our roads, all of it. So, on one side I can appreciate it. The only, it's just really difficult. If we're going to spend more, yeah, we have to go out and get more. But whether we spend it in the form of taxes or I spend it in the form of an HOA bill, it's money. So I think it's a tough decision, but I probably would really think hard before the city accepts any roads that they're not required to do. And I live on private streets. So the other thing that I do have a request, and something that I think would help, whether it's Victoria Crossing, my subdivision, in a lot of areas throughout Wildwood, is that if the city could try to, I don't know, recruit's not the right word, but to somehow participate in just contractors. What we found this year was very difficult to find people. And what we're seeing even on with Kelp and other contractors, it's struggling. And I think that if the city could provide some type of a organizational type support for a lot of the subdivisions that have private roads, to where it could be a database or a resource base, I think there could be a benefit there that has a minimal cost to the city, because time is money. But that's one thing that I have been thinking about for a while. And I know it puts a burden on the city, but I think that if we all sort of got together, we might be able to get a better deal and more options, because we're seeing the issues in our subdivision too.
I think Rick has probably thought about that, but I think you put some thought into something.
Well, I don't know. I can't deny I've thought about it. I don't know that I have a really good solution, but I mean, I've had a lot of thoughts about snow removal and how we might be able to change things in the future. You know, whether you could conceivably have some way that you had a joint bid. I suppose it might be possible. I'm sure there's some downfalls and things we'd really have to think through. I mean, we struggle. Again, we're really not any different than private subdivisions. We've struggled this year making sure we have resources to plow our streets as well. So to some degree, we're out there competing for these very resources. We'd probably like to have more, frankly, but yes, if we somehow join together, is there a partnership where both parties could see better bids or reduce costs? Maybe there is. I could see some friction potentially resulting from that too, but maybe there are ways to work around that. So maybe there is some potential to think that through a little more and consider that, but I don't have anything beyond that.
Right. I think it's a reasonable suggestion to look into, but if we for right now just focus on what we're talking about tonight in the ask, if you will, which is to just consider without, and at this point, you're right, Larry, that we don't have details in terms of what it would cost. We'd really, I mean, that's going to be subdivision by subdivision. And again, we'd work with John Young in terms of what kind of language that would be more general nature. But, if we're going to take over a street or we want to look at it, I mean, again, all the things that Rick pointed out that are part of the current policy in terms of making sure their streets up to par and those kinds of things. But then what we're asking is that we would change the policy to include language that says, okay, also then we will find out what the estimated cost is and then put some kind of inflation factor on it or something that says, well, annually it's going to cost $50,000 to maintain your 2 streets or $250,000 to maintain 3 or 5 miles of streets. Okay, for all these kinds of things. And the HOA is going to either have to do a special assessment to the homeowners or say, well, if first of all, they have to bring their streets up to standard. And then secondly, can they afford to do that? But that's what we're saying is to consider, as opposed to the city taking on an extra 50,000 or 250,000 or whatever the case may be. And that would be subdivision by subdivision or street by street. And again, I don't know the mechanism, but Rick's, I mean, he's got statistics in here on his table in terms of what it costs per mile or per yard or whatever in terms of concrete. We can estimate how much it would cost to take care of 2 major snowfalls, salt. I mean, we can come up with those kinds of numbers to say what it would cost for a street or 2 or 10.
All right, Councilmember Rainbow.
Yeah, taking over private streets is that's a big undertaking. We have and each one is different. There's the current condition, future repairs. Is it concrete? Is it asphalt? What are we actually taking on? I think Rick can probably do that on an individual case basis, but that's a whole lot more work. And so what I wanted to say now was we do have economies of scale. The city can work with the HOAs, as Larry suggested, particularly with snow removal and so forth. I mean, we can get it done probably more cheaply than the HOAs can. And it's a service. It moves the ball forward. It increases public safety and does all those kinds of things. And then we can approach the pavement issues and the street repair things and so forth sort of separately. So what I would, bottom line for me is Director Brown is our expert. We should ask him to go off, think about this some more and give us his recommendations. And then we can, kick them around and kick them to council. I think it's nice to do for the public, but Ms. Edens, Mr. Brost have pointed out the financial realities that face the city. And I'm not sure, we can do it without a whole lot more analysis. That's my comment.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Thank you. As most of you know, I've been here for a little while. And we brought this subject up several years ago when we had different council members and a team that didn't want to work together quite as well and wonderful as this whole team that we've got now has been doing. But one of the things that we brought up at one of the budget discussions was we keep adding parks. Parks cost money to maintain, et cetera. Do we slow down, or do we perhaps move some of those funds out of the parks budget and over to the street maintenance budget? I'm not trying to cut down any work that anybody's doing, but if we're working on a balanced budget, I don't understand why we can't choose as a council to move money from one pot to another pot for 5 years, whatever, and then see if we can gain some additional traction on any kind of a tax initiative or a requirement for every resident location to pay X to be able to have their snow removed. I think Mr. Rambo made a very good suggestion that we keep the road improvements themselves kind of separate from snow removal. And we look at this one snow removal issue that's close to home right now. But I look at the millions and millions and millions of dollars that we have spent on hiking trails and riding trails and parks. And I love all of them. I think it's beautiful, but we get to a point, just like I do in my home I cannot afford to put something else in here that I'm going to have to maintain because I don't have the budget to get the swimming pool cleaned every week and have the water bill, et cetera. So I have to find how I'm going to balance that budget. And so I just think perhaps we could take a closer look at that issue and see if we reroute existing funds as part of this effort for doing the road maintenance, doing the snow removal, and maybe try it with the snow removal as an initial trial. Just a suggestion.
City Administrator Cross, you have your hand up.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Ms. Dowell, you raise a very good point. And quite honestly, the council as a whole did exactly that. You all created, we created a strategic plan with 8 significant major goals. Public Works is number 4, Parks is number 8. That right there tells you where you all decided the money should go. So that tells me everything I need to do to run the city in terms of where the dollars should go. And yes, we can move the dollars around. Now, we have revenue streams that can only be spent on certain things. So the road and bridge fund and so forth, those can only be on that. They can't be diverted to parks. At some point in time, maybe we want to consider, a parks and stormwater tax. It's another source of revenue that the city may want to look at sometime in the future. Because there we can move those dollars around all kinds of places, depending on how we would present that to the residents. But yes, we can do that. However, I will tell you that Mr. Vunich will come and try to beat on me in terms of saying, well, I've got all these miles of parks and so forth and whatever, but I can say, well, stop, we're not building any new parks and we don't need to spend, X amount of thousands of dollars on Bluffy or whatever the case may be. We have the ability, and when I say we, the council and me as a city administrator, we can decide where we want those monies to go. But you all explicitly did that when you ordered and ranked the goals.
And I certainly agree with you, Mr. Cross. We did go through specific goal attainment over the coming months or coming years, excuse me. And I know that we've got the street and road improvements ahead of the parks in the next 5 years, which I think is a good thing. I just think we need to start getting out of the box that you get to have the same amount every single year, that you get to have more the next year, because, and we also need to be talking with our residents about how we can fund the things that they want to have. If you want to have snow removal service, if you want to have a park close to your house, if you want to have your streets maintained effectively, there are costs to that. And so I think we as a city need to come up with some type of a PR plan, a resident acknowledgement plan.
Well, we have a resident survey coming up. We're going to
I
start
know,
working
I
on
know,
here
that's
late
that's
spring,
what I'm-
early summer. We're going to be working
Yeah,
on that very thing.
That's, I know. So I think that'll be a good opportunity for this committee to figure out how do we go after that. And I'm not trying to say all of those things have to be done tonight or tomorrow. I just wanted to put them out there on the table so that we're looking at it, I think, from a whole city perspective when we're looking at budget dollars. So
Thank you for recognizing that we can't get that done tonight or tomorrow, all these things. I appreciate that.
Rick, did you have a comment? And
Yeah, if that's okay. What I wanted to mention was we kind of have already done what you're saying, Councilmember Dodwell, from the perspective, when I came on, we used the Road and Bridge Fund for new construction. And I tried to make this point in the memo, but I don't think it came across maybe, but we used half of the Road and Bridge Fund, more or less, for new construction projects. And to make up for the pressure, to relieve some of the fiscal pressure that's been on us every budget year, what we ended up doing essentially is that road and bridge monies are strictly going for capital maintenance, not new projects. So the new projects are coming out of the capital improvement program. So Joe would tell you there's more demand for that money, and he'd be right. Because we're doing more roadway projects out of the capital improvement program maybe than we did, say, 7 years ago. That's been something that I've seen since I've been with the city since 2015.
Councilmember Edens and then Councilmember Brost.
Okay, I've got some comments. I'm going to throw a motion around. Okay. So I hope I was kind of clear earlier, but my comments before wasn't just meant towards the funding of new projects, but also, again, the bill that we have for the same exact projects that we're already doing, right? And so Don Bartoni, who chairs Parks and Rec, is not here to defend the parks budget, but I will say, just from my memories from being on council the last couple of years, there have been times where the parks maintenance budget has been cut, and certainly cutting it further and mowing the parks less will not cover the costs of adopting new roads, and that's not a viable, feasible option, right? When every resident poll that I have ever seen, and you ask people, why do you move to the city of Wildwood, right? It goes Rockwood School District, parks and trails. And so the very thing that is getting people to move into those houses that are asking for their streets to be adopted is in fact that budget. And that's keeping the demand up and the property value up. And so the title of this whole conversation is robbing Peter to pay Paul. And it just really doesn't work out. So, one thought for tonight, and I'll put this into motion, would be, a temporary hold. And maybe the wording on this for legal reasons can't be indefinite. But I would like to see it come back in an official proposal to put a hold on adopting alleyways. I think that might be something that we could easily agree on. And then let's have the city attorney, Director Brown and Mr. Cross come back with some examples of what any MOUs with subdivisions would look like on wording. Because I just can't vote on red line language with the, term neutral without a more concrete understanding of what that will look like. So the motion on the floor would be for let's ask the administrator and Attorney Young, when is it appropriate to go ahead and look at a temporary halt on adopting of alleys?
And we don't have to take action tonight. I mean,
Okay.
I think, and we'll certainly look for guidance from the city administrator, city attorney, or Director Brown. But it's what's before us tonight is the policy and the amendment to the policy to include a fiscal point of view that
Right.
was not there before. So
So mine
Still,
go
any-
beyond that a little bit. Yeah.
so any request would still have to be vetted through the policy here. But I will defer to, again, the three folks that I just mentioned here, if they want to provide more clarity or intent.
I'll go first. I think you just summarized it. Yes. What we're looking for is direction from this committee to go forward and look at amending the policy to include some fiscal language to be determined what that is, and working with the city attorney. We're just looking for direction and guidance to.
That is
and
essentially the
approval.
motion on
I think
I would
that's
like to
what you
put
were-
on
I
the
think-
floor. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. I was just adding one step further with potentially alleyway inclusion in the future. I just thought it's, although it is an additional recommendation from another committee, it might be a quick, easy common ground that council could land on.
Well, I think, and it looks like we might have a second here, but it would seem like the recommendation covers it all. And I believe the alley would be part of what's already included since it is a private road, but City Attorney Young or City Administrator, do we need to go to include alleys, or is that already part of this?
That probably wouldn't be bad to maybe amend it to include
Okay.
explicitly the alleys. It's a new thing that we haven't had to deal with previously, so I would not be opposed to that.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Councilmember Edens and seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. And Carla, do you have that motion down? So it is the recommendation with inclusion of alleys. Right, any discussion on the motion here? I'll say, I'll make my comments. I had some comments that I was holding on to. I think it is good to have this policy here include, I mean, we have to look at financial costs to make a good decision. So I do think that we have to look at the big picture here. And we have taken over private roads in the past, most recently over in Ward 5, Evergreen subdivision. The city took that over and did some work there, putting in new curbs, I think, and some additional work. And I know some of that may have been through escrow funding around. But I also support a lot too the conversation, and the city administrator confirmed that our priorities are shifting, and we've done a lot of investment in our parks, and we have to look at infrastructure, and that includes our roads. And that's not just a local issue, it's a national issue, right? In fact, there's a big infrastructure bill, and that might be something that with now a new legislative consultant at the state, let's see if we can get our hands on some of that to help with infrastructure here for us, because there's going to be a lot of money. I think also what was brought up regarding the economies of scale and how maybe that's an immediate short-term solution, especially for those like when it comes to snow removal. If they can get a better deal, we certainly would like to see how we could support that. I know earlier there was a comment brought up about the internet tax, and I think that the city took a very human-centered approach regarding how that turned out. And I don't think anyone disagrees with it, but it's the timing for Wildwood, because right now we are facing some steep increases just in our household bills. Our residents are paying more across the board for everything. 401ks are down. We're dealing with inflation, a new gas tax. However, we are going to benefit with the internet sales tax from the county portion. And I think that's going to bring us an influx of money that we just didn't count on or expected before. So it'd be good to see what that looks like. And certainly with the intent of updating this policy with a fiscal perspective, that's when we know then how much we need in order to pay for what we're taking over. The other thing too, I would say with the internet sales taxes is Wildwood, when you look at all the communities around us, we have one of probably the healthiest reserve around. We're about 16 million. Most cities around us are not even close to that. We're talking about single-digit millions of reserves. So we're in a very good position, and yet we want to be fiscally responsible to hold on to those reserves for when we need to in an emergency. So I support this motion right now to include the fiscal aspect of it, but also I would ask that we do look and see how we can the economies of scale, and then we can take a look at these requests as they come in with a big picture. So that's my comments there that I've been holding on to. Any other comments? All right. With the motion on the floor, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any oppose or any abstain? All right, it passes. So next on the agenda here, we have number 2, the city contractor proposed agreement for native plant maintenance or stormwater BMPs. That Dr. Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair Gaetano. I'll take this one. As you probably are aware, we with the improvements projects to Route 109, one that was just completed a couple of years ago, and the work that was completed around 2015, we've constructed a number of stormwater management facilities as part of those improvement projects. There's a couple up near Pond Grover Loop Road that we maintain. There's 3 new areas south of Route 100 along the roadside that are also stormwater management basins that we are required to maintain. And these are all facilities that either retain stormwater to prevent flooding and or clean the water by filtering it through a medium to try to clean it before it goes into the ground. So we're required to maintain these through an agreement essentially with MSD. MSD and the city are co-permittee with a permit with the state of Missouri that is required through the Clean Water Act. So it is ultimately a federal requirement that we maintain these facilities. So the long and short of it is that we are trying to hire a contractor to maintain these for us and keep them in good condition so that we can report to MSD that everything is working as intended. So to do that, we've put a bid out and got 4 contractors that submitted bids in response to our requests. And I think I provided those bids to you in my memorandum. There were 2 that were on the low end of prices and the two were on the high end of the price range. The 2 on the low end were Go Green Lawn and Landscape, as well as Land Design. Go Green was the lowest with a rate of 14,400 per year, total of 43,200 for 3 years. So tonight we are making a recommendation to move forward with a contract with Go Green Lawn and Landscape to maintain these areas for the rest of 2022 and potentially for the following 3 years or 2 years rather, assuming they do perform well for us. So that is the recommendation to the committee.
Is there any motion for the recommendation? Councilmember Godwell, is there a second? Councilmember Edens? Any discussion on the motion? Councilmember Groves.
So Rick, they're saying they're gonna hold the price for 3 years.
That's correct. They did not show any price increase over the next 2 years. So that was certainly favorable from my perspective, yes.
So it wasn't, they didn't decline to bid those 2 years. They offered it at the same price.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
All right, seeing no other hands up, all those in favor of the motion on the floor to move forward with the recommendation, say aye.
Aye.
Any oppose or abstain? All right, motion passes. Next and last for action item, we have the contractor bids for the 2022 asphalt resurfacing project.
Council members, as you probably know, we have had an annual citywide resurfacing project for some time, and for our budget for 2022, we have about $600,000 budgeted this year. For the 2022 project, we are planning to utilize the Nova Chip thin lift asphalt product that we've done for a number of years, primarily on our rural roads, and found to be a very effective treatment for those roads. So we did put together a bid for 2022 to resurface, and I provided the streets on my memorandum: Hinken Road, Bouquet, Old Manchester way out west, small portion of Taylor Road immediately south of 109, essentially to Brightleaf. There's an older piece that was unimproved, and then Austin Fort Road as well as Bassett Road, which I imagine a bunch of us probably have never even been on Bassett Road because it's way out west. But anyway, those are the streets we're planning on resurfacing this year with this project. When we put the bids out, we had 2 bidders, which has been the norm when we've done this bid for the thin lift Nova Chip asphalt surface. The low bidder was NB West out of Pacific, as they have been for a number of years. Pace was the second bidder, and they have been the second bidder for a number of years as well. So the recommendation is to move forward with a contract with NB West to resurface our roads this year. Their bid was about just less than $589,000. We're recommending allowance for change orders so that the contract sum would not exceed $600,000. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be glad to entertain them.
Is there anyone that'd like to make a motion with the recommendation as provided by the department? Made by Councilmember Nine. Is there a second? Councilmember Edens. All right, we have a motion on the floor. Any discussion or question? Councilmember Groves.
Yeah, Rick, I guess I'm looking at this, that it's $588,000 for 7.4 miles. I don't know, it just analytically, is that? I mean, if I'm thinking about that in my head and compared to, yeah, we maintain our own roads and a lot less budget, but it just seems like a lot of money. What am I missing? I mean, it's looks like a good deal compared to the other, but it just seems like a lot of money for 7 miles.
Well, the unit price that NB West is quoting, I mean, I can provide you those numbers, frankly, if you'd like to see them through the years. I almost thought about doing that relative to the prior discussion with concrete street pavement. I know that their unit price has increased, but $5.85 is still a pretty good rate. It's not gone up significantly over the course of the last year or anything. This is comparable to what we've paid previously. We've budgeted typically for asphalt resurfacing around $500,000 to $600,000 a year since I've been with the city for the last 5 to 7 years. We did cut it back through the pandemic last year because we had to cut the budgets. But the bid is comparable. It's not greatly inflated. And I think for the lane miles that we get, it's an excellent product. Because it's 3/4 inch thick, it creates minimal impacts to driveways. So it's easy to apply and it's very durable. And a lot of these roads, if we overlay them, I'm very confident, we'd probably be not touching them for 15, 20 years. So it's a very good value. It's more expensive than you might otherwise use. Some of the other surface treatments, you frankly do get what you pay for. So we spend less, it lasts much shorter. But this product, it really does last a long time. It's very durable.
One of the perspectives, Mr. Gross, if you look, 7.4 miles sounds like not a lot, but when you look at 82,000 square yards of asphalt, if you look at it from that perspective, that's a lot. 7 miles doesn't seem very long, but when you're talking about the width of the street and the depth, even though this is a thin thing, 82,000 square yards of asphalt. A whole lot.
This is the road and shoulder or just road?
Well,
If there is a shoulder?
if there's a shoulder, it would include the shoulder. So I would tell you, we have on the order of 70 miles of rural roads. So we're getting 7 miles of those roads with this one project. So, it gives you an idea. It goes pretty far. That's basically
You said we have 70?
70, yeah, about 70 miles of rural roads. So we're getting 7 miles, about a tenth of those in any 1 year. So that's a good value. And I think that's where we need to be.
Remember, you have a follow-up?
No.
Okay, Councilmember Dodwell.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. I go up and down Strecker Road pretty much every day. And if you pull off of 100 onto Strecker, you're in Ellisville. And you can certainly tell the definitive difference between what he's talking about putting on these roadways versus what Ellisville has on their roadways. I'm not knocking Ellisville, it's just the way that they chose to do things. And I think, I'm trying to remember, Rick, how many years ago you redid Strecker? I think that's been almost eight, maybe 9
Well, actually, I
years.
believe it was 2013. So it's going on
Ye-
9 years.
Yeah. And I think along the entire route from where our city boundary crosses from Ellisville into Wildwood, which takes you all the way down to, what road is that? The one by the old Catholic school. It's escaping me right now, but that's probably a good 3 or 4 miles of roadway. There may be 2, 4, maybe 5 potholes that have had to been refilled along that roadway. In Ellisville, from 100 up to where Wildwood hits, I think it's maybe a half a mile, maybe 3/4. And there's probably, there's potholes everywhere. Let me just put it that way. So as Rick said, you get what you pay for. And I guess it helps the road crew out. So they have something to do. I'm not knocking Ellisville, I'm really not. But we don't have the staff that they do to do that kind of upkeep on roads. So just my perspective.
Rick, quick question. This, I remember, if I remember correctly, the Nova chip, this is like a unique patented product that only certain providers can lay down, right? And is that correct?
I don't know that it's patented, but it is a unique product in that it's laid down in basically one step. So they have a paver that it's pretty expensive equipment, frankly, that's required to place it. And the paver is expensive, and there's only 2 contractors in town that actually own the equipment. That's why we typically just get the 2 bids.
Okay, I thought that there was something unique about this. And I guess doing the math here, if it lasts about 15 or 20 years, you're basically paying about $4,000 per mile for each year of this road. So you don't do any other maintenance once you put this down, right? This is it.
Other than restriping, yeah, that's correct.
Okay,
Yep.
sounds good. Don't see any other, oh, Councilmember Rambo.
Yeah, just real quickly. There's a considerable difference. This sounds as though it sort of splits the difference between asphalt resurfacing and chip and seal. Chip and seal, you might as well call it a real thick coat of paint. They got to put down some sealer and then they put down the product and then they roll it and so on and so forth. And a lot of, it's really labor intensive. This gets several times thicker and it's actually real asphalt on top of real asphalt. And it's basically renewing the entire road. And it's the cost doesn't seem significantly more expensive when you talk about a 20-foot, 22-foot, 24-foot, 30-foot wide expanse of road. We're fixing 7.4 miles of them for $600,000. It's an incredibly good value, and I'm excited that we have this product that we're using, and I'm thinking about using it on my own.
All right.
But good work on this, Rick. Thanks.
All right, well, seeing no other hands up and sounds like there's consensus. We have a motion on the floor, so all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed or any abstain? All right, the motion passed. Got several items. Is updated there. Thank you, Steve Cross, for doing that. And now we're miscellaneous. Any other questions or comments on the miscellaneous? Councilmember Bros.
Yeah, I'll just backtrack to the topics. I know when we went over this, and I'm certainly not suggesting to change it, Mr. Cross, but it did seem awful aggressive to me. So just, it seemed aggressive. It's everything's really crunched in. I hope we follow it. Because I think a lot of the items have a tendency to, to continue to resurface. So I just think it's real aggressive. So if you accomplish it, congratulations.
I'll add a comment. I think that, there will likely be committee changes after next month. So that's our gift to the new committee. City Administrator Cross, do you have anything?
Mr. Bros, thank you for recognizing that. But we did note these are proposed timeframes. So those words are up there at the very top. But we have, I think the committee, did the right thing in at least putting some timeframes on it so that we, yes, I'm hopeful that you recognize that some of these may not be hit within that specific month or so, but they're not going to languish on here for years. We will work hard to hit these timeframes, but there's a lot here. I agree, and thank you for noticing that. So I'm sorry.
There's not a lot to do the second half.
Maybe the ones that carry over. So.
All right. Well, yeah, we have one more item. Other miscellaneous. Councilmember Dodd.
I just remembered another question I have. Sorry, gentlemen and ladies. How did the meeting go with Ellisville regarding Truman Road? They're along that property line. I saw your memo, but it was a little vague. So.
Perhaps intentionally so. I'm
okay.
Not sure.
Well,
I
that's
shouldn't say that. The mayor and I did have a conversation with Mayor Romerman Friday. We were at a luncheon, and I sat next to him and said, "I'd like to talk to you about MoDOT and some issues after the luncheon," and which we started into. He is, his words were, "I am adamantly opposed," he's adamantly opposed to any putting in restrictions of turning and so forth. The mayor joined us because the mayor was sitting at a little different spot, but he joined us. What the mayor did, and I applaud him for this, is said, well, let's see if we can't find some common ground. Okay. And that's when we started talking about, instead of having the ordinance right now, which restricts at any time of the day or night, 7 days a week from those left turn lanes, coming from off of Truman trying to get to 100 or coming down West Glen Farms and trying to turn onto Truman, which, as I said, Mayor Romerman is absolutely opposed to, has talked to MoDOT because that is MoDOT's intersection, and we cannot get Ryan to respond to us. And so I inquired about that. So Ryan is not responding to us. But I think Mayor Boland's suggestion, which Mayor Romerman was agreeable to, was to looking into signage, maybe hours of the day, so that we could accomplish what he wants, but also try to help out our residents and you all that live in the area. So Rick and I have talked about it. Rick is going to put together a recommendation for how we would get that accomplished. He does need to talk to Ryan Piercy about that intersection and things that we can do. There was an additional conversation that had to do with stopping cut through traffic and Mayor Romerman subdivision going up and having, do not enter or no cut through type signage. So we'll see where that goes. But ultimately, and Rick pointed this out to me when I got back from that lunch and we had the conversation, is that we have an ordinance in place right now that restricts that. But having the ordinance is one thing, getting MoDOT to actually act on it is another. And effectively, MoDOT has been, in some form or fashion, they are not doing anything. So we have to work through that. And I think this compromise, hopefully, as the mayor wrote in his email to you all, if we'll just see. Does that help? Well, I think where Mayor Boland was going was, again, trying to find a compromise, because at the end of the day, as I say, Mayor Roman was pretty strong in his words about not wanting that to go through. But at the end of the day, we can put up signage that says, hey, between the hours of, I don't know, 8 and 5 or whatever it is. And I'm waiting for Mr. Brown to come back with his written recommendation about that. And then we'll just see. I mean, it's something that we can offer to the residents as opposed to nothing. Mm-hmm. But again, as the mayor, and that's a good suggestion. As the mayor said, right now, Mr. Brown is going to make a recommendation of how we, what we can do, who's going to do it, and the time frame, and that's what I asked him to do. And we'll just have to see. But ultimately, that's going to involve MoDOT, and we'll, and hopefully this compromise will move him off center, because right now he's kind of been. Right now, he's not responding.
Thank you very much.
All right, any other questions? All right, Steve, question for you. I just wanted to talk trash for a second. Yeah, just a quick question about it, though. How is that going these days? Better, worse, same?
Not better. I would say about the same, which is unacceptable. Okay, so I asked Rick, I had a conversation with Rick and the city attorney. I want a letter to go out of this of City Hall under my signature no later than this week to invoke the financial penalties that we have available that we can support through documentation. So Rick and Michelle and I will be meeting tomorrow to go over that documentation, and then I will work with City Attorney Young to draft that letter in terms of, to give you an example. They, per the contract, are allowed one missed pickup per week, four per month. Okay. Complaints. So, and they're far and away exceeding that. And what is that, $25 of pop, or is that the $100 a pop? Okay, 25. Anyway, at the end of the day, it's not the, the financial side of it per se, although, I mean, they took money out of our pocket by taking away the rebate and kind of holding their gun to their head. And I'm going to call it like it is, in terms of renewing the contract, that's coming up on August 1. But we are doing a couple of things. I asked for and ultimately received the names of the two gentlemen. I wanted 2 levels above the gentleman who was the area director, Rob Gill. And he did supply those to me. One is the area vice president, and one's another district vice president. Every email that goes out of here from Michelle or Rick or myself to them includes those 2 gentlemen. And what we have seen, which is pretty interesting, because for a while there, the residents would call in and say, you missed, I want a refund. I pay my money and you didn't pick up my trash. And they go, no refunds. Now, what we have seen now in the last week is that when Rob responds to us, and I will give them credit. They are responding immediately from either a leaking truck or getting out and picking up a missed pickup or whatever. That's great. What I want to get to is where we don't have to deal with 15 or 20 or 30 emails per day about this kind of stuff. I want that to go away. But what he is doing is when he responds, then he says, Carol, and that's his person there, the billing person there, 1 month credit for recycling. And I mean, we've seen this now over the last week to 10 days. I mean, he's throwing out a month of credit to somebody who didn't get the recycle pickup. So somebody, and I suspect it's one of those 2 gentlemen that I'm now including on every one of the emails, has said, you need to take care of this. But I want them to see that their performance is unacceptable. So we still have arrows in our quiver to use with them. He's trying, but it hasn't really gotten a whole lot better, other than maybe the credits, and we're still dealing on a daily basis, a missed street, a missed subdivision, et cetera. Rick, you want to add to that?
Quite frankly, optimistically, I'd like to think it's been better this week, but I'd say it's too early to say, really. It's only Tuesday, yeah.
We're hoping. All right. Well, it's supposed to maybe snow, so that might change. All right. I don't see any other questions or comments, so motion to adjourn. Councilmember Bros, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.